if you still hate Hillary Clinton too fucking bad, um, basically, I don't care about Hillary Clinton either, but this is a good story to talk about. But it says if you still hate Hillary Clinton for some reason, it's time that you get the fuck over it. She was right about Donald Trump and his movement back in 2016, and she's still right now. During the presidential campaign 5 years ago, Clinton made the simple observation that a large percentage of the Donald Trump sycophants would be considered a basket of deplorables because of their racism, white supremacy, nativism, misogyny, religious hatred, and other retrograde antisocial values and beliefs. As somebody wrote several weeks ago, in many ways, Clinton was too kind to basically put it in that many words. If anything, she underestimated how many Americans were in fact committed and enthusiastic human deplorables. After that speech, Clinton was pillared by the mainstream news media, some leading Democrats, and of course the Republican Party and the Republican propaganda hate machine. Clinton's characterization of Trump's basket of deplorables was described as insensitive and unfair to the white working class Americans and elites and out-of-touch Democrats had too often ignored. Technically, if you're a Trump supporter, you don't work, you're unemployed. So anyway, the reaction to Clinton's truth-telling helped to legitimate Trumpism and American neo-fascism operated under the mask of populism as something that was reasonable and understandable rather than as a manifestation of racial resentment, a racist temper tantrum, and a declaration of white supremacy. This reflected our society's deep investment in the narrative of white racial innocence. In that logic, America is a great and exceptional country, and by implication, this is especially true of white people, especially those real Americans who supposed fake patriotism and presumed fake Christian values render them a bit more American than anyone else. In the weeks since then, evidence has only mounted on the seriousness of the coup plot and how close excuse me, and how close the United States came to succumbing to a Republican fascist revolution. That coup attempt has not ended, and indeed it has escalated, and America is fast approaching to a point of no return. The response to an essay about Clinton's warnings about Trump's deplorables was an outpouring of rage from self-described progressive Democrats and others who claimed to oppose Donald Trump. In essence, it was a lot of people who seemed to be psychologically decomposing or in the midst of an emotional breakdown. These reactions were rooted in an unrestrained hatred toward Hillary Clinton, and in this case, toward anyone who would dare to suggest that she was ever correct about anything. By this point, Clinton must be used to such reactions, and to her credit, and unlike many other members of the American political elite, she is speaking out now even more boldly and clearly about the specific threat posed to American democracy and society by Donald Trump and the politically psychopathic Republican fascist movement. In a recent interview at the Atlantic Festival of Ideals, Clinton had discussed the decades-long trajectory that brought America the disastrous events of January 6th. Unfortunately, she said, I saw a line from what I saw and tried to describe it in the 90s through the beginning of the century, the first 20 years of it, and the role that Donald Trump and his enablers and others played in creating this absolute cauldron of conspiracy and hatred and anger and looking for explanations and scapegoats. I sadly think that the seeds were planted long ago, but they have been watered vigorously in recent years. She focused on the years since her own presidential campaign, which we have seen the Republican Party openly embrace a plan to nullify the American democracy. So the parallels between what happened in 2016 and 2020 are not often understood, and why is that important? The Republicans, and now we have to say the Republican Party, not just the Trumpers and all of those who are part of this effort to undermine our democracy, but the Republican Party as a whole, were shocked that they lost because they never thought that they would lose by such narrow margins, and we know accurately and legitimately in places like Georgia and Arizona. So what are they fucking going to do now? Now they're not only going to try to suppress the votes on steroids, they're going to try to cheat and change the way the elections are determined. They're going to try to give legislators the power to basically throw out elections if it doesn't go their way, because now they want to be able to win, even if they lose the popular vote and they legitimately lose the electoral college. Which electoral college is a fucking joke anyway, but yeah. Clinton had observed that she personally knew many of the leading Republicans who were lining up and saluting Trumpism, and adding that they're giving up their values, their common sense. It's amazing, she concluded. We're looking at a phenomenon that is fueled not just by political calculation, partisan advantage, personal survival as a politician, but we're looking at cultural phenomenon even more than a political phenomenon. The audience for anger and for fear or hatred is so large in America right now, and as we have said earlier, sadly, much of the responsibility has to lie with the tech companies who have been the channels for creating that kind of information system that we are now living with. But Clinton is again showing herself to be an astute observer of America's democracy crisis and the role of the Republican Party in a decade-long plan to undermine or overthrow the country's multiracial democracy. Once again, too many people will reject her insights because they remain afflicted with the Hillary derangement syndrome. But the important lesson here has little to do with Hillary Clinton in particular, but defeating the Republican fascist movement will require political pragmatism in the form of alliances between individuals and groups who are in the near past have opposed one another and who no doubt will again in the future, but are now united in defense of democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law. America's democracy crisis truly is an all-hands-on-deck emergency. There is a little room for ideologues, except where all parties can work towards a shared goal of defeating the Republican fascists, along with their followers, allies, and agents. But in an open letter that was first published at the New Republican, the Bulwark, co-authored by journalism professor Todd Gitlin, he's a political scientist, Jeffrey C. Isaac, and the conservatard commentator William Kristol had co-signed by dozens of prominent academics, journalists, and activists. Their argument for a common front alliance was made explicit, and it begins: "We are writers, academics, and political activists who have long disagreed about many fucking things. But some of us Democrats and other Republicans, some identify with the Democratic side, some with the Republican side, and some with neither. We have disagreed in the past, and we hope to be able to disagree productively for years to come, because we believe in the pluralism that is at the heart of democracy. Right now, we agree on a fundamental point: we need to join together to defend a democratic democracy, because democratic democracy itself is in serious danger. The democratic democracy depends on free and fair elections, respect for the rights of others, the rule of law, a commitment to truth, and tolerance in our public discourse. But all of these are now in serious fucking danger. The primary source of this danger is one of our two major national parties, the Republican Party, which remains under the sway of Donald Trump, and the Trumpism authoritarianism. Unimpeded by Trump's defeat in 2020 and unfazed by the January 6th insurrection, Trump and his sycophantic inbreds actively work to exploit anxieties and prejudices, to promote reckless hostility to the truth and to Americans who disagree with them, and to discredit the very practice of free and fair elections in which winners and losers respect the peaceful transfer of power. In the essay for Common Dreams, Isaac explains how this friendly collaboration between ideological foes came about. Some of our signatories have long been aligned with the anti-war movement and with the Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. Some have been aligned with the more centrist Obama, Clinton, Biden wing. Some were supporters of John McCain or Mitt Romney, and some, most notably Bill Kristol, were supporters of the George W. Bush and of Ronald Reagan before him. But we have not checked for differences at the door, and yet we have come together precisely because we regard these differences as important, and we believe that as the forces of know-nothingism, racism, and reaction associated with Trumpism prevail, we will all suffer. Our political differences are real, and our joint commitment to democracy is grounded in those very differences. And many who will read this will be angry about what some of our signatories have said or done in the past. And this is fucking understandable. This does not require us to like all of those with whom we join, though we have made some real friendships through this collaboration. Nor does it require us to forget about their past or our own past in general. It simply requires us to acknowledge the ethical and political importance of coming together across differences to defend the things that we value in common. Perhaps Benjamin Franklin said it best: "At another moment when some very different people came together to oppose the tyranny of their time, we must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly we all shall hang separately." As the first drafts of history are being written about this dire historical period, one important theme will be about how many pro-democracy Americans work together, often quietly or in secret, from the highest levels of government, including the military and the national security agencies, to the local and state levels, and across civil society more broadly, in an effort to stop the Trump regime's plot to nullify the 2020 presidential election. But those afflicted with Hillary derangement syndrome should feel free to bray at the moon, scream into the wind, or do whatever else is necessary to get the energy out of their fucking system. But this is a moment to join in alliance with others across ordinary lines of politics and ideology, and to stop the Republican fascist movement. Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is really a friend. Well, obviously I don't see it that way. But if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And thanks for listening.